Look, the whole thing is a hoax. It's put out by the Democrats because we've had the most successful 6 months in the history of our country, and that's just a way of trying to divert attention to something that's total bullshit. Okay?
Let's start where they always tell you not to look. Trump and Epstein's relationship. These two weren't just around each other like every other rich guy in Palm Beach. They were comfortable, familiar, and moving through the same world for years. In the 90s and 2000s, you've got photos, social events, overlapping guest lists, and flight records all showing Trump in Epstein's orbit. Not as some distant acquaintance, but as another regular in that billionaire boys club that treated New York, Palm Beach, and private jets like one big playground. In 2002, Trump tells New York Magazine that Epstein is a terrific guy, and jokes that they both like beautiful women. Adding that some of them are on the younger side, which reads very differently when you know Epstein was already on law enforcement's radar for preying on underage girls. Fast forward to 2019, when Epstein is arrested again, and suddenly Trump's story changes. Now he wasn't a fan. Now they fell out years ago. Now it's all distant history. As if the photos, the social overlap, and the witness statements all just evaporated the second it got politically inconvenient. Then, there's the holy relic of Trump fandom, the Lago ban. His defenders drag that out like it's the smoking gun of his innocence. He kicked Epstein out of his club. Checkmate. But when you listen to Trump describe it himself, the hero story collapses into something much uglier and much smaller. He doesn't say, I banned him because I discovered he was abusing underage girls. He says, Epstein stole young women from Mar-a-Lago's spa, poaching his staff and causing problems inside his own operation. That's not moral clarity. That's workplace drama. A turf war between two rich men over who gets to control which women in which venue. Put that next to survivor accounts and court records showing Epstein recruiting girls around Palm Beach, including from places like Mar-a-Lago, and the picture looks less like a principled stand and more like Trump getting annoyed that the predator he'd been friendly with for years started treating his club like a hunting ground. Now, look at what just dropped. The latest and supposedly final trench of Epstein Files from the US Justice Department. More than 3 million pages of documents, over 2,000 videos, and around 180,000 images. This is not a meme folder. It's a state-level archive of an entire trafficking ecosystem. Draft indictments, laying out dozens of charges, FBI, interview summaries, internal emails, court material, intelligence leads, and years worth of communications that show how Epstein operated and who kept orbiting him. Inside that mountain, Trump's name shows up over and over again. Sometimes in news clippings, sometimes in direct references, sometimes in allegations reported to the FBI or DOJ, sometimes in emails and documents talking about how politically radioactive his presence in the files is. Do all of those mentions equal a criminal conviction? No. And even the DOJ is at pains to say that some of the more extreme and anonymous claims in the files are sensationalist or unverified, especially material rushed in around the 2020 election. But that's not the bar here. The bar is, was Trump a random extra, or was he repeatedly, structurally tied into the same world that enabled Epstein's abuse? The answer on paper is obvious. He is not a footnote. He's a reoccurring character. The documents describe things like Epstein bragging in emails that he's close enough to Trump to take him down if he wanted. Internal chatter about what it would mean if certain messages and names went public. And testimony about social events where Trump, Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and young women all move through the same rooms. One FBI interview detail sticks out. A witness identified as Free tells investigators that Maxwell presented a victim to Trump at a New York party. Reading out her achievements like a CV. And later, that same victim was given a tour of Lago by Trump with Epstein and Maxwell present. The witness clarifies that nothing sexual happened between Trump and that victim. And that matters. You don't need to invent crimes that aren't there. But you also can't pretend that a president being personally walked around his estate with Epstein, Maxwell, and the victim in tow is just happening to be in the same building. It shows proximity, access, familiarity. The kind of closeness you only get when everyone involved understands the rules of the game and thinks no one is watching. And this is where Trump's behavior in office becomes part of the story, not separate from it. In 2025, under heavy pressure from both parties and the Epstein's victims, Congress passes the Epstein Files Transparency Act almost unanimously, 427 to 1 in the House. The law is blunt. The Attorney General must make all Epstein-related files publicly available in a searchable download format within 30 days. And has to give Congress an unredacted list of government officials and politically exposed persons named in those files. Trump signs it on 19th of November 2025. After publicly flirting with the idea of a veto and complaining through allies that he wanted amendments. But he doesn't veto it because a veto would have been crushed. They had more than enough votes to override him. He even posts online that he signed the bill, painting himself as the guy who's finally going to let the people see the truth about Epstein. The deadline in the law is simple. December 19th, 2025. By that date, the DOJ should have dumped the files, minus the narrow exceptions for things like active investigations or genuine victim safety concerns. Did that happen? No. Instead, the department slow walks the release. Small batches here and there. Partial document sets. And long statements about how complicated and time-consuming the process is. There's no punishment written into the law for missing the deadline, so they get away with blowing past it. But that doesn't change the fact they were in violation of the timeline in a statute Trump himself signed. Behind the scenes, reporting shows that officials were acutely aware that Trump's name appeared thousands of times across the files already released, and that further material would only deepen the political headache. By the time we get to the January 2026 mega dump, you have the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, out front saying the DOJ is releasing more than 3 million pages, and insisting that the department didn't protect Trump, even as he admits Trump's name appears throughout and had become the center of a political firestorm. He stresses that a lot of the Trump mentions are just press clippings, that some accusations are false, and that the priority was always the victims, not the president's image. All of that might be partially true, but it doesn't erase the obvious fact. The same administration that signed a law promising fast, unflinching transparency, then dragged its feet for weeks, missed the deadline, and only fully opened the tap once. Congress, the media, and the public made it impossible not to. Meanwhile, Trump's public line has been pure deflection. On the campaign trail and online, he pumps conspiracy theories about how the Epstein Files are a deep state weapon cooked up by Obama, Comey, Biden, whoever. Anyone but the federal government that worked for him and the Congress that forced his hand. He promises again and again that he's going to declassify everything and expose the whole network, only to stiff-arm his own supporters and legislators once he's back in office, and releasing what full transparency would actually look like when his own name is all over the index. At first, he plays it like a hoax, a witch hunt, a partisan stunt. Then, as the votes pile up and the pressure grows, he pivots into, I support the release, and tries to retroactively cast himself as the man who wanted these files out all along. It's the same move he pulls everywhere else. Deny, minimize, blame the enemy, and when that fails, pretend it was your brave idea from the start. Now, where was Sky News when all this was happening? Not completely silent, that would be too obvious, but playing a much subtler game. When Trump signs the Epstein Files Transparency Act in November 2025, Sky runs straight-faced explainer pieces about how he's approved the release and what might happen next, framing it as a historic transparency move by a president willing to let the truth come out. They tell viewers the DOJ has until December 19th to release everything. They quote Democrats pressing Trump's Attorney General for an update. And they present it like a neutral, institutional process that will naturally unfold. There's no real interrogation of the obvious conflict of interest. The man whose name appears throughout the files is the same man whose administration controls the timing, the redactions, and the framing of the release. When the big January 2026 dump finally hits, Sky leans hard into the spectacle and the logistics. You get live hits from correspondents talking about the magnitude of the evidence and how the sheer volume of material, millions of pages, thousands of videos, hundreds of thousands of images, explains why the DOJ took so long. Their pieces amplify the official line that the delay wasn't about protecting anyone powerful. It was just the inevitable result of sorting, redacting, and preparing an unprecedented release. And they repeat Blanche's insistence that Trump wasn't shielded. Again, technically that note might be a blatant lie, but it's also not the full story, and it's certainly not the kind of relentless, skeptical scrutiny Sky happily deploys against any target it's not invested in. Because here's what Sky is brilliant at. They understand their audience. They know an older, conservative-leaning viewer doesn't want to sit through an hour of their favourite straight-talking outsider being dissected in the same forensic way Sky will dissect Labour MP's expense claim or some student protest. So instead of digging into the specific ways Trump name shows up, the emails where Epstein brags he can take him down, the FBI interviews, the timeline of Trump's shifting stories, the missed legal deadline, they give you vibes. They give you magnitude. They give you complexity. They give you no one is being protected. And then they pivot back to safer content. Loony left segments, culture war panels, and comfort food narratives about brave ordinary people against crazy woke elites. For years, that ecosystem has done two things at once. It's hammered the left as corrupt, degenerate, unpatriotic, and it's gently patted the landing every time Trump crashes into another scandal. On Epstein, that meant talking about everyone named in the files. In this vague, abstract way, lumping together royals, Democrats, tech billionaires, and celebrities. Without sitting their viewers down and saying, very plainly, your guy is all over these documents. He signed the law. He broke the timeline. He lied about how close he was. And he's been calling the whole thing a hoax, while his own Justice Department was sitting on millions of pages that contradict his story. And that's why this isn't just about Trump. It's about the generation that was fed this narrative on repeat. A whole slice of boomers have been parked in front of channels like Sky for a decade, told that Trump is a flawed, rough around the edges saviour, standing between them and chaos. And every piece of information that threatens that image gets handled with kid gloves. They were trained to think real journalism is yelling about university pronouns or identity politics, while the actual identity politics of worshipping a rich, white nationalist strongman as a messiah goes unexamined. So when the Epstein Files land, when the DOJ finally dumps millions of pages, and the president they were sold as a truth teller turns out to be tangled up in the same filth they thought he'd expose, they don't adjust. They double down. He banned Epstein from Lago. He signed the act. It's all just a Democrat hoax. The DOJ said some of it isn't true, so none of it matters. They cling to one clean, simple antidote. The ban, the signature, the talking point. Because the full picture is too ugly. A president who partied with a predator, praised him on record, only distanced himself when it became toxic, signed a transparency law to calm the mob. Then oversaw an administration that dragged its feet on releasing the files and tried to blame the boogeyman of Obama and the deep state when the pressure got too strong. I was right about Trump because I looked at the pattern, not the promo reel. The pattern is a man who swims comfortably in the same pools as predators, benefits from their networks and money, rewrites history the moment they become liabilities, and treats laws he signs as optional if they threaten his image. The pattern is a media class, from Sky News down, that played identity politics harder than anyone while pretending to be above it, painting him as the voice of real people, and quietly looking away when the documents started spelling out just how deep his connections ran. And the pattern is a base that has been trained to scream witch hunt at any uncomfortable fact, even when those facts are literally written in black and white across millions of pages their own hero promised to release. So when someone still throws, "But he kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago" at you in 2026, when the files are out and the deadlines have been broken and the excuses have been exposed, you are not overreacting if you lose it a bit. You are just done pretending that vibes, loyalty, and boomer cable news narratives outweigh evidence, timelines, and the actual paper trail of what this man did, who he moved with, and how hard he tried to keep the truth from coming out.